各位觀眾大家好，歡迎收睇26分鐘見證實錄。每年6月係加拿大原住民歷史月，紀念原住民對國家社會嘅貢獻，以及慶祝原住民文化。而6月21號就更加係全國原住民日。不過今年嘅原住民歷史月，佢係籠罩住一片陰影。啱啱喺上個月尾，卑詩內陸 Kamloops 原住民寄宿學校遺址發現215具兒童遺骸。事件引發公眾廣泛關注，並且深思本國呢一段歧視同黑暗嘅歷史。正所謂鑑古知今，本地有帶有華裔背景嘅原住民家庭就致力希望透過佢哋自己嘅家族故事，俾大家更加了解原住民嘅歷史以及早期原住民同埋家國華人嘅深厚淵源，從而提醒大家種族和諧嘅重要性。原住民係加拿大遼闊嘅土地上最早嘅居民。歷史上黑暗嘅一頁，令今年6月嘅加拿大原住民歷史月由慶祝變為悼念以及反思。
As a dad, I can't imagine what it would feel like to have my kids taken away from me. And as Prime Minister, I am appalled by the shameful policy that stole Indigenous children from their communities.
歷史上不同種族以及無數嘅家庭深受歧視所害。究竟點樣先至能夠令現代社會學懂種族共融呢一課呢？
I hit the double whammy, I guess.
一批 Musqueam 原住民用215束花朵喺地上砌出一個完整嘅心形圖案，但係對於部族嘅人嚟講，呢一日卻係心碎嘅一日。
And the day that we got that bad news of the finding of the children, like my cousin says, there's thousands more.
呢一次嘅活動係 Musqueam 原住民社區為悼念早前被發現喺卑詩內陸前原住民寄宿學校死去嘅215名兒童而舉行。其中一名前嚟參加活動嘅 Musqueam 原住民名叫 Howard Grant。
I'm Howard Grant, but my traditional name is Kayapalanuk. But I'm half Chinese, and my Chinese name is Hong Munhing. That was provided to me by my family at that time when my father was still alive. So I have 3 names.
Howard Grant 嘅父親康添興洪添興喺1920年離開中國，繳付500蚊人頭稅前嚟加拿大，抵達卑詩省之後落地生根，其後同一名 Musqueam 原住民女子 Agnes Grant 結婚，生咗包括 Howard 在內嘅4名子女。正因為家庭擁有華裔以及原住民嘅雙重背景，所以亦都遭受當年印第安法以及排華法嘅雙重影響。
The sad thing to say, racism existed then and it exists now, and even more so now simply because it was hidden underneath the veneer or the tablecloth of the table. It is now placed on top of that tablecloth whereby you can see. I hit the double whammy. As a little boy, growing up, my early years, that's up to about 7 years old, we had a float house, and I would live on there, and it would the lap of the wave would put me to sleep and wake me up, and I'd paddle around in the morning. Like I learned how to paddle before I really learned how to walk.
Howard 從細喺 Musqueam 保留地長大，現時佢仍然居住喺呢一度。佢擔任 Musqueam 原住民議會成員30多年，現時亦都係第一民族議會行政主席。由於佢嘅父親係華裔，所以佢當年原住民嘅身份不被承認，但係反而就令佢唔需要入讀原住民寄宿學校。
I escaped only because I was a non-status Indian, and they couldn't force me to go. I wanted to go because my cousins were going, and the guy that came down to pick them up, they called him a brother, almost a priest kind of guy, saw me playing soccer, and I was a good soccer player, so he wanted me to go to that school and play. So I think he said, "Yeah, you got to come, Howard." You know, and thank God, our local priest told my mother, "Don't send him." You know, so I didn't go.
不過，基於當年嘅法例，令佢哋嘅家庭同樣要分離。
When my father married my mother, he could no longer live on the reserve. You know, so my father had to live downtown Vancouver. So he would live in the Mayo Hotel on Kiefer and Main, and then he rented a rooming house on Jackson Apartments. You know, and it was sad because I got to see my dad on weekends only. My older brothers and sisters went to Chinese school for a year or two. I didn't because I lived on the reserve, and my brothers and sisters lived in downtown.
Howard 表示自己從細就有好多接觸歷史嘅機會。
I grew up not having to attend residential school. Therefore, I became the surrogate son, grandson, nephew of all of our village members because their children had to go away to residential school. So I gained the knowledge of their histories. I was indoctrinated, I guess, deeply into my mother's history and culture and whatnot. Whereas on my father's side, so I only got to see him for a few years, really, not, you know, and not even that, you know, and he died on my 10th birthday, you know, so November 1st, 1956. And so you're supposed to have a happy birthday every year, but it becomes harder.
喺2013年尾 ，Howard 同兩位哥哥 Gordon 以及 Larry 同埋其他嘅家庭成員決定參與一次到中國廣東省嘅尋根之旅。整個旅程更加被拍攝成紀錄片《All Our Fathers Relations》祖根父脈。
The devastating impact of legislation issued by the Canadian government on First Nations and Chinese communities separated both sides of our families for generations. We're quite late in our lives now that we're trying to connect more fully to our roots.
Howard 父親嘅家鄉係喺中國廣東省中山一個叫做四門嘅地方。
So we found it, and we got to the gates, and you could see the gate, and it was my extended family that sent the money back to China to build that gate for Seimun Village.
6 brothers, the wife, number 6 wife. The youngest brother. 2 daughters of your youngest son.
I did not know that I still had a uncle still alive. You know, so it brought tears to my eyes, of course.
17th generation of the whole family. The grandfather inside the picture is the 15th generation. Hong Zai Yao. He had 5 sons and 2 daughters.
Then all of a sudden, members of my family all arrived there, and we had lunch and stuff like that. And they took a picture, and they all weren't there. But then they took out this book. And they showed me this family book. And it had the genealogy for 17 generations. And we were the 18th generation in the book. You know? And that's amazing.
The experience was surreal to me, being able to go there with my father the first time he went back, and to experience that with him, to see him and the emotions that it brought to him, because he had only known his father for 10 years and didn't really get to experience the culture and the language. So for him to go back there and ask me to be a part of it, I was so happy.
Wade Grant 係 Howard 嘅兒子，該次嘅家族尋根之旅，佢亦都有一同參與。當中嘅經歷令佢非常感動。
Is that you? Yeah. How did I get a picture? pictures of you.
Hey, there's Howard. There's Howard here.
Yeah, that's Gordy.
Well, let me take a picture of that. I was brought into a room, and they wanted me to go through a book of pictures that they had shown. And they showed pictures of my family, my father, myself. But the most surreal part of it was they got to the end of the photo book, and they had photos of my own children. They had photos of Eli and Isla, who were, I think, 5 and 3 at the time. So somebody, and I still don't know who, keeps sending photos of their family from Canada back to them. And they don't even know who we are, but it's important for them to be connected to who we are. And they got these photos and they had them all in a booklet. It was amazing.
Wade 自細喺 Musqueam 原住民社區長大以及生活，同佢父親一樣，佢活躍於社區，推動原住民事務。佢目前係 Musqueam 原住民部族嘅跨政府官員，亦都曾經喺前自由黨省政府年代擔任省長嘅原住民事務顧問。但係同時，佢亦都對自己家族嘅華裔背景以及歷史深感興趣。
I think I began having interest in my own family history when I was in elementary and high school, being not Chinese enough or not Indigenous enough, and wanting to embrace and understand more about people from different cultures. Because it would help me learn a bit more about who I am as well. So I had a number of friends from first generation from China as well, talked to them about why their families came here, how long they've been here, and the kids from Musqueam as well, to talk about how they grew up. Because I know that we all grew up in different homes, and trying to figure that out, and helped me really embrace who I was and continue asking those questions. I'm always curious about identity and who I am as a Musqueam and Chinese and Caucasian person.
For the family here today to show us where our family lived, where our father lived, is so touching.
我哋整個家族咧，就今日
好多謝你哋都，
你哋咁遠翻就從加拿大翻到嚟探我哋，好開心，
好開心係，
我哋真係好開心。好嘅，身體健康嚇，呢度先好，呢度先好。
Howard 同 Wade 都表示，希望透過家族故事，印證唔同文化係可以和諧融合㗎。
I realized that my dad's side of the family and my mother's side of the family were two of the same human beings. They felt for family, and they embraced me. They didn't say, "Oh, you're half Chinese," you know. They grabbed onto me and said, "You are my family."
It's important for me to share my family story because my family story is an important part of Canadian history. The first immigrants of Canada that came from China are almost forgotten these days. They're forgotten that they've come. This country was built on the back of immigrants on land that was stolen. And I'm part of 2 of those communities. Those people that came over and paid the head tax, weren't considered citizens, and those people that were here first, that had their land taken from them and still weren't considered citizens. And these 2 communities don't know how close they were for the first part of this country. They don't know how close those relationships were, and it needs to be told.
Grant 家庭該次嘅尋根之旅，對於佢哋嘅家族嚟講啊，當然係一次難忘嘅經歷啦。而整個嘅尋根探索過程，對本地原住民歷史研究學者嚟講，就更加係一段珍貴嘅資料以及教材。下一次翻嚟再睇。翻嚟節目時間，正當大家都喺度討論要認清家國歷史真相嘅同時，近年家國繼續多次出現種族仇恨以及歧視嘅事件。有學者以及藝術家就希望透過原住民及華裔歷史研究以及藝術交流，去推動文化融合以及種族和諧嘅精神。
So a lot of people enjoy having a taste of the documentary.
喺溫哥華華埠華裔加拿大人博物館內，其中一項影片展覽 就係關於 Grant 家族尋根之旅嘅紀錄片電影《All Our Father's Relations》祖根父脈嘅片段。
So I just wanted to show you there.
Sarah Ling 凌慧意係博物館嘅展覽及項目經理，佢係第4代華裔移民。多年嚟，佢對於原住民歷史研究深感興趣。而佢亦都係 All Our Father's Relations 嘅首席製片人。
I grew up in Prince Rupert, BC, which is the northern part of the province, and the community there is quite connected to the local First Nations. So I think my upbringing has informed my interest. But when I attended the University of British Columbia for my undergraduate, I had the chance to study in the First Nations and Indigenous Studies program, and that really opened my eyes to various issues of ongoing colonialism. But I also had the opportunity to learn more about my own history and the many generations of Chinese Canadians who formed relationships with Indigenous people.
Sarah 其後繼續鑽研原住民同加國華人嘅歷史研究。更加喺卑斯大學修讀 Musqueam 原住民語言課程，認識咗課程導師 Musqueam 原住民長老 Larry Grant， 即係 Howard Grant 嘅哥哥。亦因為咁而開始咗 Grant 家族到中國尋根之旅嘅拍攝過程。
I think one of the key messages we would like viewers to receive is that there is a very rich history in Canada that we need to take the time to learn and be open to. A lot of this history we were not taught either in public school or in the mainstream media, and so we really need to take the time to listen to the stories of the Indigenous peoples of these lands, and also take the time to learn more about ourselves, the importance of our own family histories and our roots. So this is a great photo of Larry and his brother Howard, and they're actually on their family's farm, Lynn Onion, in 1949. And you can see many examples of mutual partnership and friendship. For example, the Musqueam community welcomed Chinese people to farm on their reserve. We also see First Nations and Chinese working alongside each other, whether it's in the canneries or in the hop fields, even restaurants. The early relationships between Indigenous peoples in BC and Chinese Canadians, it was quite often mutually respectful and reciprocal in the sense that both communities faced harsh discrimination and racism at the time. We can say that they still do today, but those conditions brought the communities quite close together. So I don't think we will reach that place of eliminating racism soon. I think that's a very lofty goal, and we need to find ways to empower people to stand up in solidarity with each other.
Fold it in half, and then give me the top, right?
而 solidarity 團結，正正就係 Sarah 近期參與嘅一個項目嘅主題。
I'm gonna grab the top, you're gonna grab the bottom, okay? Come close.
呢一日 ，Sarah 同一名本地華裔藝術家黃毅林 Lam Wong 喺華埠中山公園，正係為一個藝術展覽嘅開幕進行準備工作。
係幾大嘅展覽嘅，咁個名咧就係叫做 River Have Mouths 嚇，咁咧我哋就有7位藝術家嘅，包括我在內嚇。同埋 Sarah Ling 另外一個 co-curator 嚇，咁呢個展覽咧其實係我哋有1年嘅program 嘅，關於華人藝術家同埋原住民藝術家嘅一個交流嘅一個 program 嚇，咁呢個 program 就叫 Solidarity 咁咯。Oh, this is for Sideway。
黃毅林從2019年開始擔任中山公園嘅駐館藝術家。佢表示，構思呢一個展覽係因為留意到，雖然歷史上原住民同華人有好多方面嘅聯繫，但係有關雙方嘅藝術交流喺本地卻係從未做過。
因為咧我哋策劃呢個展覽嗰陣時咧，就係響肺炎之前嘅，咁所以咧嗰陣時咧就亦都未有residential school 啊個 mass grave 發現啦，亦都Asian hate or racism 種種嘅social issue 咧就未有咁呈現得咁深嘅，咁呢排就好深啦，咁變咗呢個展覽更加係比較重要咯嚇。咁我哋嗰陣時個目標其實就好簡單嘅，做一個交流會咧就可以即係 learning from each other， 即係大家了解對方嘅文化、歷史 同埋生活方式，咁同埋喺藝術創作上邊嘅唔同嘅過程。
而喺呢一次嘅展覽之中 ，Sarah 就選擇咗用圖片去呈現原住民同早年華人嘅淵源。
Looking at the two mouths of these rivers and how many connections that were formed to feed the community, to share history, to overcome challenges with one another, and it shows how the relationships we form between our communities, both Chinese and First Nations, will really strengthen who we are as a community and as a society of different cultures when we're able to help each other, exchange with each other, and talk with each other.
Hope, hope, che, we are child.
經過1年多時間嘅籌備，呢一個藝術展喺上星期正式開幕。
And raise my hand and welcome to all of you that are here today to witness the work of the intercultural relationship that has always existed here in Chinatown.
This project is probably one of the most meaningful projects I have done in my life.
Our ancestors have been facing discrimination, racism, and the harms of colonial systems for many hundreds of years now. But we must also be reminded of the ways in which they came together.
開幕禮上，在場人士默哀215秒，去紀念 Kamloops 原住民寄宿學校死去嘅兒童。
Now raise your hand if you're Asian. Raise your hand if you're Indigenous. We've been paddling together for a long time. That journey started hundreds of years ago. It's not over. We have an opportunity to work together.
喺今年嘅加拿大原住民歷史月，各方都提出要譴責種族歧視與暴力。甚至國內有聲浪要求取消慶祝加拿大國慶。有歷史學家就認為，單單取消慶祝國慶不足以解決問題。
It's not going to solve the issues, obviously, but it is something that will help people understand that there are issues. There are a lot of people, my family, lots of relatives who are very thankful to come to Canada, but who should they be thanking? So it's like when you come over to someone else's house, you know, who's your host? You bring gifts, you kind of say, thank you so much for the hospitality. The hospitality is not the Canadian government, you know, and this is not, they're not sharing their land with us. That was stolen. It's stolen land, stolen resources.
卑斯大學歷史系副教授余傳毅 Henry Yu 認為，承認歷史係第一步，之後就係要實質嘅行動，以做到共融。
First thing is to acknowledge that we are an unceded territory. And to begin to deal with that in concrete ways, which means, recognizing that we live on stolen property and how to make it right by working with Indigenous peoples. I don't think most Indigenous communities just want to see everyone who's not Indigenous leave. That's not going to work. So there's going to be other ways we can live together.
當心情慢慢平復翻啦，揾到一個 balance 先至可以達到一個和諧嘅效果咁樣咯。咁我本身係藝術家，所以我就希望讓當代藝術或者傳統嘅藝術都可以將呢種咁嘅治療同埋方法帶出嚟咁樣咯。咁啊慢慢走翻向一個和諧嘅一個程度。
I think knowing one's history and language is really important for identity and also our ability to form a better understanding and respect for people from other cultures. It creates for, I think, stronger dialogue.
要真正做到避免黑暗歷史重演 ，Howard 同 Wade Grants 就認為公眾教育同埋對下一代嘅灌輸都好重要。所以佢哋經常都會參與唔同形式嘅討論，爭取機會去推動原住民文化同埋種族和諧。
Yes, we need to educate the public. We need every province to incorporate, legislate that their curriculum has to contain the Indigenous and the Chinese history.
An apology is just words without action. We need action to ensure that things like these are brought into the forefront so people can learn from their past.
好啦，今集嘅節目時間呢又差唔多啦。咁喺下個星期，我哋會去了解點樣咧透過地方旅遊以及飲食去認識原住民歷史以及文化。咁如果觀眾對我哋今集節目有啲乜嘢意見嘅話，亦都好歡迎大家以電郵嘅方式同我哋聯絡。咁如果想重溫翻今集嘅節目，亦都可以上到去我哋嘅網站點擊節目重溫一欄。好啦，下星期同一時間再同大家見面，晚安。